Hello, I'm Stephen Price and welcome to the show. Today I'm in conversation with Chris Curtis, editor of the media trade magazine Broadcast. Hello Chris, thanks for coming.
My pleasure, Stephen. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, it's early in 2018. The year stretches before us like a thing, full of unknowns. And I thought we could talk about a couple of issues that have been bubbling around for a while, but may come to a head this year.
Mm-hmm.
The first one being Channel 4. New chief executive inserted,
Yes.
New creative officer inserted. But the big issue for the channel is their geographical location. The government has made it clear they want Channel 4 to move to boost growth and jobs in the regions.
Yes.
It's been talked about for quite a while. Do you think it'll actually happen?
I think it is a likelihood that Channel 4 will move a proportion of its staff outside of London. Quite what that proportion is the subject of some back and forth at the moment between the broadcaster and the DCMS. At the moment, they are sort of trying to come up with what will move, how significant a relocation it needs to be before they move on to the prospect of where they might go to. But informed estimates before Christmas suggested that you could easily see C4 moving 200, 250, maybe up to 300 staff outside of London. That would be closing in on around half of its workforce. And for a long time, C4's position was that it matters not where they are based, but instead how much they spend outside of London. They appear, in the nicest possible way, to have probably lost that argument with the government.
Okay, that's interesting. Well, on the grounds of what? Because it smacks a little bit of tokenism if you consider Channel 4 don't make anything themselves and commission, so they can commission from around the country. On what basis did you think they lost that argument?
Well, I think they've lost the argument because it isn't what the government wants, rather than necessarily that it's the intricacies of logic and
no logic here, everybody,
and common sense. Look, if Channel 4 ramped up what it spends outside of London, above and beyond what it does at the moment, would that have the impact of better reflecting the UK? That would be the question. And you could make a case that yes, it would, but you could also make a case that no, it wouldn't, frankly. You could make a case that London-based independent production companies would pitch metropolitan ideas to London-based commissioners who would greenlight that show and say, oh, look, because of our Ofcom quota, it'd be fantastic if you could make this series in Leeds or Bristol or Cardiff. And what effect does that have on better reflecting the UK or broadening the geographical spread of the media industry in the UK? So if you were being cynical, you would say that it might have zero effect. If you were being more positive, you could say that, well, if you make a show in Leeds, you would imbue it with the Yorkshire way of thinking. So and you can be anywhere on that spectrum. But what's happened fundamentally is that the government wants more than just a quota, which is a slightly nebulous thing.
Which you can get round in various ways.
Precisely. What they want is they want a photograph. Okay? They want a photograph on the front page of probably all the national papers, but several local papers as well, with a big Channel 4 and a beaming chief executive, and the fact that C4 is going to open a major office in insert English regional city here. And that will have the effect of stimulating the local economy, that it will turn one of these locations into a thriving second or third, if you count Salford, potentially Glasgow, Cardiff, we can argue about that, media hub in the UK. And that's really where the government's at. And it's the extent to what does C4 need to do in order to satisfy that and to ensure that it remains healthy, well-functioning organisation, and potentially actually benefiting from this. This could potentially be a thing that could. Exactly.
So, do you think is there still a resistance, or has there been resistance from Channel 4 I mean, a new chief executive would have come along knowing all this was going to happen. So I presume that during the various interview stages, this will have come up and a plan will have been drawn up. So do you think there is any resistance to Channel 4? It's just a question of how it's carved up or who goes?
I think it's become an issue of realpolitik, that they understand that this is going to happen in some form. And the question is the bit of horse trading to make sure that they're happy with the outcome. Was there resistance previously? Yes.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that happened is for a long time C4 was fighting a battle with the government against privatisation.
Of course.
The previous chief executive, David Abraham, was adamant that privatisation would have been a very bad thing for Channel 4, and I would say that that view was shared, if not universally, then with a consensus. That view was shared across the television industry.
Yes.
And so C4 found itself at loggerheads with the government. In the end, C4 won that battle over privatisation, but I'm not sure the government was minded to step back on too many issues, and having agreed that they weren't going to privatise Channel 4, I think they therefore looked to say, well, okay, what can we do with C4 that's going to fit in with our philosophy, our agenda? And clearly at the moment, the government is trying to engender in cities outside of London a sense of vibrancy, a sense of growth. And the idea would be that you can, a member of the British public, have a strong, viable, interesting media career without having to move to West London.
Yeah, so it's to try and break the perceived or real stranglehold of London as over the country in general, and Channel 4's move would fit into that. Northern powerhouse idea.
Precisely.
And they feel, and the government feels that Channel 4, I suppose, if they can, like you say, if they have that opportunity with the building and a big Channel 4 sign, and chief executive standing outside it with big thumbs up, and the mayor with a chain around the neck also standing there, that would stimulate local economy. And I'm interested actually in the idea of that notion that you commission. So the argument is you commission all around the country, but it's sort of from a London perspective. If it has actually an idea generated in a region or in a city or wherever, it's going to have more resonance to that place.
Yeah, I mean, there's no. You could live in Primrose Hill and survive solely on frappuccinos, polenta, and sun-dried tomatoes.
Ooh, tomatoes!
And you could still be completely in touch with the general British public.
Oh, of course, yes.
But if you live in that world,
there
is a possibility that your concerns and the prism through which you see the world might be different from someone. And you can end up sounding crass about this sort of thing, but compared to someone who lives in a 2 up, 2 down in Derby. And it will be interesting to see whether this has sort of been handed to Channel 4. They weren't pushing for it or crying out for it. This is being handed to them. And the challenge for Alex Mann,
Alex Mann is the chief executive.
She is the new chief executive at C4, for Ian Katz, who's the new director of programmes at C4, and the key staff that they assemble around them is, can you turn this relocation, whether it's full or partial? Look, it's not inconceivable they don't relocate any staff, but it's highly unlikely in my view. Given that this thing's going to happen, we believe, how do you turn that into a strength? And there is an argument, I think, that says if you were creating Channel 4 now, today, to be the voice of the alternative, a different perspective, a fresh, sharp, incisive organisation that is an outsider by its very existence, that you probably wouldn't locate it in Westminster, in London, where
on the Horseferry Road,
indeed,
in fact,
where it is at the moment. So, can you turn that into a strength? Can you find people that wouldn't necessarily? This is probably a generation or even 2 generations down the line, because realistically, they move to Leeds, Sheffield, Birmingham, wherever it is. They'll be encouraging their staff to go with them. So not very transformative if they get a high percentage of staff to go with them. And if they don't, they need to fill gaps. They may well be recruiting from that London pool of people and saying, hey, fancy moving to Birmingham, Leeds, Sheffield, where house prices are significantly cheaper and you can live the nice lifestyle, blah, blah, blah. 2-3 generations down the line, can you have, and again, it sounds slightly crash, I'm going to use the word indigenous people, but can you have people from that region who have grown up and do potentially have a different perspective on things taking those jobs?
Well, it's interesting. Yeah, I mean, when ITV was a true regional organisation, you had little Channel 4s in Yorkshire, little Channel 4s in Manchester, little Channel 4s in Birmingham, little Channel 4s in Plymouth. But since ITV has merged into one sort of lump, that sense of regionality is sorely missed. So I'm thinking if Channel 4 can pull that trick off, or the move of it can pull that trick off, that feels like a better thing, because I think it's sorely missed. So Channel 4, very traditional broadcaster, launched in 1982. I remember it.
Bonus points, Stephen.
I missed a lecture for it, you'll be thrilled to know. In the non-traditional broadcasting world, and the proliferation of streaming services like Netflix and Amazon and soon to arrive Disney, who of the traditional broadcasters, Channel 4, BBC, ITV, Channel 5, who do you think is most under threat?
I think they all are. And I think that judging the extent of that threat is a really interesting challenge. And it's very easy to both understate and overstate the threat of these services, which sounds like an exercise in fence sitting by me, but I'll try and explain very briefly.
I'll push you off.
Yeah, indeed. It is not the case that people up and down the UK are turning their back on traditional linear broadcasting in their droves and spending all their time watching purely Amazon, Netflix and Sky box sets.
No, that's right. We have plenty of examples. Bake Off getting 10 million on Channel 4, The Blue Planet getting 14 million on BBC
Precisely.
Strictly getting 11 million every week.
The most interesting, I mean, you would point to all of those. Fascinating what Love Island achieved last year.
Oh, Love Island, yes, of course.
The idea that, young people don't watch telly anymore.
Oh,
well, they do. And not only do they watch it, they're prepared to watch it night after night for a stripped show.
Yeah.
So knocking that sort of idea into a cocked hat.
Talking about it the next day.
Water coolers, if such
such a thing exists anymore.
I think probably Snapchat is the modern water cooler. But it is not the case that these organisations, the traditional broadcasters, are dying a death in front of our eyes.
No.
Neither is it the case that the emergence of these big global, very wealthy players are not denting the sides. Neither is it the case that these organisations do not represent in the long to medium term, if not quite an existential threat, then a very meaningful one.
Yeah.
And very interesting data released by Virgin Media recently.
Yes, of course.
So in Virgin Media's, I think it's 2.8 million homes where they have the new whiz-bang set-top box, which has Netflix embedded in the technology on the EPG. You can find it very easily. You don't have to use 2 or 3 different controls to get Netflix. In those 2.8 million homes that Virgin with this new Virgin kit, Netflix is as viewed as BBC Two.
Yeah, that's big.
That's big.
Yeah,
that's big. So, if I were the BBC and I saw that data, would I be concerned? Yes, because you'd have to be. You'd be bonkers.
That's like having a channel that's in the traditional sense, a channel launching with straight away with 10%. 10% share, which you would take seriously.
Which actually, perversely, has never hasn't happened for. Since
Channel
4.
Yeah.
So
that took time to do that.
Indeed. And the idea now that anyone could launch from scratch a linear broadcaster and achieve that is sort of unthinkable. I don't know if you'd agree.
Definitely. I mean, your Channel 5 launched with. I was there. I was a bit hungover, but I was there. It was.
So were the Spice Girls.
Yeah, the Spice Girls were definitely there. That was a night. The 2 or 3% share, I think, and that felt like a good start. But I think you can nowadays channels launch with half a share point, tiny channels elsewhere. So a main traditional style broadcaster doesn't launch with anything like that.
No.
So, and yet, having said that, Netflix are in this sample home of Virgin homes, which leads me to think we talked about the threat to BBC and Channel 4 and ITV. It must also pose a threat, I would have thought, to Sky.
Yeah, I think it does. It's fascinating that Netflix is not available in the Sky box at the moment.
Yeah.
I suspect that will change this year. I suspect that they will do a deal because if you are Sky and you are as well as an originator of content, you're an aggregator of content.
Yeah.
The last thing you want is a very attractive content proposition being outside of your empire. You want it within your walled garden. You want, if people want to watch Netflix, you want them to be able to do that within the parameters of your Sky furniture.
So it's not an impediment to getting a Sky box, i.e., I can't get Netflix on that, so I don't buy a Sky box.
There's lots of data, isn't there, that you will have seen that suggests that those households which consume a lot of Netflix are often pay TV households.
Yes.
They're often super consumers
Yes.
of content. And we haven't quite yet in the UK seen the cord cutting phenomenon that's happened in the States.
Yeah.
For lots of different reasons, I think. But we haven't quite seen that idea that, I used to have my $80, $85, $100 cable package, and I'm going to turn my back on that in favour of a $10 Netflix sub. That is sort of happening in the States, where we're starting to see skinny bundles emerge and all kind of things. But there are nods to it. Now TV is a nod to it, half-fat Sky.
Yeah, and they are, the fact that Sky have announced a Fire Stick, in effect, is an acknowledgement of that. I don't know if you use the word threat, but they're acknowledging that Netflix is a real thing now. It's not going to go away anytime soon, and they are joining in that kind of way of delivering TV, which doesn't involve their set-top boxes. Because I'm guessing, in a few years' time, when lots of people have got smart televisions now connected to broadband, but when that sort of, almost everybody's got one of those, the way to watch television might not be through a set-top box. It'll be through your TV. And it might be that you can have a Netflix subscription, a Amazon subscription, a Disney subscription, and maybe you have a sports subscription provided by Sky for 6 months of the year or a month at a time.
Yes.
Or if you want to watch the Ashes, for example,
yes.
you might just have it for 3 months or 4 months of sheer agony as we lose again.
The one days were good.
Oh yeah, but the one days were absolutely splendid. But so I can see how that future. Could become very real very soon, and it does rather mean that it seems to me that the set-top box becomes suddenly a bit like the TV aerial, which case it was like, well, they're actually Sky have announced the no more satellite dishes the rest of this, later in this year, I think.
Yes.
But I can, when the set-top box came along, it was a real revolution because it was a technological revolution: pause, rewind, easy recording, and now the next massive technological revolution of that ilk feels like the smart TV.
But the really interesting thing about what you've just mentioned with smart TV and with various apps potentially as the gateway into content is that if the set-top box starts to move away, starts to sort of fade away, whether the EPG starts to fade away.
Yes.
And if you are coming back to those broadcasters, those traditional broadcasters who could be threatened by some of this structural change, one of the issues is that BBC, ITV, Channel 4, Channel 5 certainly, have been buoyed in their lifetime by their prominence on the EPG.
Yes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
As well, and there are still households in the UK, probably households with older people, I would be so bold as to venture, where they don't get much beyond those first five channels, and they're de facto. If I now turn on my telly, what comes up is my Sky Q homepage, telling me to watch the box set of Britannia or to watch some Sky Sports content. So you could argue there's a slight issue around PSB prominence on that, but that's nothing compared to what it might happen if I turn on my telly and what I see is a Netflix app, a Disney app, an Amazon app, etc. And for those big traditional broadcasters, the idea that some of the passing traffic being on, use the shop analogy, that being on the sort of prime high street locations is going to be sort of tugged away from underneath them, that is worrying. Ofcom is going at some point to start a piece of work around EPG prominence, which sounds very dusty and dull. And
it's not. It's really fascinating.
Well, it might be a bit dusty and dull, but what it is bloody important.
It is important. Yeah, I think it's much underplayed actually, because you can. You forget. it wasn't that long ago you turned your telly on and the first channel that came up on everybody's television was BBC One, because it just happened.
Yes.
And I can remember when ITV ran a slightly spurious marketing campaign saying ITV3 Britain's favourite button or something. But even by then, as a little late, sort of early 21st century, that wasn't necessarily the case. So, but the top 5 TV channels where it is almost default viewing get a huge amount of prominence. But I can also see the sort of the remaining 250 channels not being on the EPG at all. Because why would you necessarily pay for an EPG position 175 where you're never going to get past the page one or these apps? Instead, have an app, say UK TV app. They have channels across the EPG.
Yes.
A UK TV Play app where you can access their programming that way. I can see that changing, but what will be most interesting is BBC One, BBC Two, and ITV and Channel 4 and Channel 5.
Yes.
Whether they give up that position or whether some viewers actually quite like it.
Yes.
Quite a nice way to watch television.
Yeah, no, agreed. And again, this is one of those things where the world is both moving very fast, but it's neither is it those things that we're used to, sort of all disappearing overnight. I think the other thing that's going on is a lot of consolidation. These big companies coming together and big companies getting bigger, and at the moment, those traditional PSB broadcasters are not part of bigger global entities, or if they are, in the case of Channel 5 and Viacom, haven't really leveraged that too much.
Not really, no.
As yet.
Not yet.
Your average Channel 5 viewer doesn't think, I'm watching part of the Viacom empire here. No. But if you start to imagine a world in which Disney, with all its IP assets, owns Fox, or the majority of Fox, with all of its IP assets, and owns Sky, whether that's 39% of Sky or 100% of Sky, that starts to feel like a very powerful, well-rounded, vertically integrated company that owns a lot of content and has significant broadcast platforms in the UK, Ireland, Germany, Italy, and Star in Asia, obviously a very big group. So there are structural things going on which do speak to big changes.
Yeah. So to wrap up this grilling, Chris, what are you enjoying on TV at the moment as a punter, and what are you looking forward to that you know about?
What am I watching in my real life?
In your real life, I know that's hard to remember.
In my real life,
you're a new dad. You're a busy man. Do you have any time?
Not a huge amount, and actually, what I'm enjoying at the moment slightly speaks to that, and I wrote about it for Broadcast fairly recently, is that there's 2 half-hour shows which I'm really into at the moment, and what I like about them is the fact that they're very distinctive and they're different from a lot of other. They're both scripted shows, but a lot of other things that are on air at the moment. So there's a Channel 4 Netflix co-production from Clerkenwell Films called The End of the Effing World. I don't know, Stephen, what your swearing policy is on the show.
Flipping. End of the Flipping World. Flipping World will do.
But it's very distinctive. It's kind of sort of hyper real, and it's ostensibly set in the real world, but with emotions and actions sort of ramped up. It's got 2 young actors, boy and a girl, as the leads, who go off on this kind of slightly off-kilter crime spree, and it's beautifully shot. The script's good. It's got an awful lot of voiceover, which often can kill things, but really
narration.
Exactly, from both the lead character's point of view.
Yes,
so you hear the thoughts of the young male lead and the young female lead, and it's really different. And one of the reasons, linking back to these things they're not even they're commercial half-hour episodes, right?
Yeah, so 23 minutes.
Precisely, and it's indicative of the really nice quality and the transportative, if that's a word, storytelling that you can achieve in this short period of time.
Why not?
So that's fantastic. And something that shares those qualities is BBC Two's Inside Number 9.
Oh, yes.
From Reece Shearsmith, Steve Pemberton, 2 of the League of Gentlemen crew from back in the day, but incredibly inventive, incredibly given a lot of freedom.
Yeah.
It doesn't stick to normal genre rules. Broadly speaking, you'd say it was a comedy.
Comedy, but at the dark heart.
Very much a dark, a sort of dark, and yet lots of interesting gags in there, and often quite a lot of physical, sort of almost slapstick kind of comedy in some ways, and some dark twists and dark turns. Again, half hour, you can dip in and out, takes you somewhere that you're, it doesn't feel like your normal world, and both those shows are getting the thumbs up from me at the moment.
Oh, excellent. I love it at the moment is Derry Girls, the show set in Northern Ireland in the 1990s. It is genuinely funny, but also slightly surreal, and the characters. And we were talking earlier outside, where we were talking about the programs that can transport you into them, and you just feel. I've never been to Northern Ireland in the 1990s, but I feel like I'm there every day. It's very fun. And there's a terrifying nun in it, but not in a way you'd expect. Thank you, Chris, so much for taking the time to chat to me today. I've really enjoyed it. It's really interesting. And thank you also for watching. And until next time, goodbye.